Look at him. He's rocking harder
I
than
put on
I
a
am.
pink shirt today. I feel fancy.
I'm slacking over here.
I am definitely underdressed. But Jeff Sanders is in the house with us tonight.
How's it going?
Jeff is a friend of mine here from Nashville, Tennessee, which we haven't been friends that long. I think we met officially at the Podcast Audio Lab, the one and only in-person Podcast Audio Lab that I did right before the pandemic started, in February of 2020. And we've just been kind of hanging out online pretty much, I guess. But we wanted to have Jeff on the show because, A, he's a baller podcaster. How many downloads does your podcast have at this point?
10.3 million.
10.3. We have 10.3 for this one. So
10.35, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff's got 10.3 million. We're at 10.3, period. Someone about a third of the way in just gave up. They were
now
like,
11 people because I'm here and I watch. So
Yeah.
yes, that's how we're growing our audience. We're just having more guests on. That's our strategy.
That's the way. That's the game.
But your podcast, The 5 A.M. Miracle, is just guest interviews. Like, that's all you do, or do you do any solo episodes as well?
the show began alternating back and forth. So it was an interview and then a solo show. So every episode alternated back and forth. In the last 2 years, I have done a lot more interviews, in part because I decided that there were a lot of cool people I just wanted to talk to, and people that were pitching me to be on the show that I like doing that a lot more. It's a lot of work also to make your own content and to map out a show that's efficient and that's helpful and full of good advice. Like it's a lot easier to do an interview, frankly. It's just a lot less effort on my part. So part of it's laziness. The other part of it is I like the people I'm talking to. So it works both ways.
I definitely like good conversation. And that's why we had you on. So
there you go.
But so how long have you been podcasting now?
I will have my 8-year anniversary in 2 weeks. So there you go.
So basically,
this is my second podcast, though. My very first one I launched in 2008, and it lasted 3 episodes. And then my brother emailed me and asked me why I was doing such a terrible show, and so I canceled it. So
what was it about?
It was called Gibberish, and it was exactly what that sounds like. So that's it.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
So what changed? What was the difference?
The difference was that first show was basically me just testing the waters. So I just graduated college, and I was actually working part-time for Apple at their retail store in Boston. And I wanted to tinker around with, because they gave me like some free software, and I was basically just testing to see, like, do I want to podcast as a thing? And I really enjoyed it, but I also realized immediately, like, I don't have content. I had nothing to say. Like, I was 23, and I was like, I got a job. I have an apartment now. Like, it was just really dumb stuff. But like, I wanted to talk. I wanted a microphone, and I had one. It's like, okay, I'm going to use it, but I wasn't saying anything of value. And I realized then, like, I need to like become a human being first, and then I can discuss something. So that happened later on.
Gotcha. Yeah, becoming a human being is hard sometimes.
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
That's what gives us the stuff to share.
Right.
What microphone did you start with?
Oh,
sorry, Marley. What microphone did you start with?
It was the one that came with the Behringer podcast studio. I forget the exact name of the mic itself. It was bad. I mean, very cheap. I think it was like $80 for the kit, and I got the little tiny mixer.
Glad you said that.
And I ended up giving away the whole thing a couple of years ago because it sat in my garage for so long, and I was like, I'm not using this. So there you go.
Nice.
don't we have some drama about Behringer? Is this like a segue or what? Like, where am I remembering this? Did you post the
Marcus
article,
really wants to talk
Marcus?
about how bad Behringer is these days.
Yes. And Adam I know is a big fan of Behringer, but
I love collecting them in the broken equipment bag at the studio. That's my favorite place for a Behringer product, you know.
they're easy. The broken Behringer stuff is very easy to collect. But
Yeah.
Jeff, I don't know if you saw, they have a new microphone coming out.
Yes, I
That
think
is
I saw
called
that.
the BX 2020, which is oddly familiar to the
Very
18.
familiar.
Yeah, the
AZR,
18
Classic
2020.
Behringer fashion.
Oh no.
Come on, Behringer.
That's what they do.
Yeah, they
That's what
just
they do.
rip people off.
They're
I mean,
the
I'm not
kings.
the original. The original Behringer podcast studio was great if you don't have a budget and don't care about the quality of your show. But
For 99
later-
bucks.
later
There's
on-
something to be
Podcast on it.
said. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to start
problem.
somewhere. You got to start
right.
somewhere.
Well,
Has a
I
place
was
in the
very
world.
happy to own it. It was not. I was not upset about it at all. It wasn't until later on when I learned what real audio sounds like. I was like, oh yeah, I should change something.
So
for
what did
everything.
you? So you had your Behringer thing. Look, Marcus and I love diving into the world of gear.
Yeah.
So what woke you up? Like, what did you get next? Like, how did you figure out what to do? You're like, you went from zero to hero. So like, take us through it.
The basic answer was that I listened to a ton of shows and was reverse engineering the content and the styles and the genres and trying to figure out like what does a good show even sound like. And I ultimately decided upon the original version of Michael Hyatt's podcast that he no longer does. This was his solo show years ago, and I liked his format in terms of the way he broke down content. So I was using his, like I literally would like script out his show and like bullet point it. So I knew like how he was delivering content. So that was that aspect. And then I bought Cliff Ravenscraft. He had a bundle that included the Mackie mixer and the Heil PR40 and this other kind of gear that I bought from him, learned how to use Audition to edit. And that's what I started with and literally used for 7 years until I met this guy, Marcus, and he told me I was dumb and I should do other things with a lot of money.
I never said you were dumb. You're
In
a
other
very, very
words,
smart
it used
guy.
a lot of other language, but it was like, hey, Jeff, buy some stuff. So I did. Hence all this stuff you're seeing here, thanks to this guy.
His wife does not like me probably because they've spent a lot of
She
money
doesn't
on
know
gear.
much. That's on purpose, because if she did, my marriage would be
her in
in
the dark.
trouble. No.
Yeah.
You're like,
She's
this
aware.
old thing? Oh, I just
Yeah,
pulled this
this
out
is-
of the closet. Yeah.
Right. I've always had this. Right. But yeah,
That's amazing.
it's been
Well,
a
I
fun
gotta
journey.
say, at 22, that's a lot of self-awareness to understand that your podcast wasn't good. Because I think collectively we still haven't figured it out. You know what I mean? So at 22, you're ahead of the game. You know?
Well, I have a background in theater, and I knew that there was like a certain aspect of the podcast that I wanted to be a performance. I wanted to sound good. I wanted to be entertaining and engaging. And I knew listening to my own content, this was, my own voice. So like, I liked what I said, but I also knew that like I had no third-party brain giving me smart advice until my brother was like, seriously, Jeff, stop this. And so I was like, okay, fine. But, years later, I got better at it. But that initial test was just to see, like, is this something for me? Do I want to do this ever again? And I knew from that test that I was really, like, into it. I wanted to do more. And it was just a question of what will it take for me to, have good content, to have the gear, to learn how to use it. And so that was probably 4 or 5 years later that I finally made that leap.
So did you come up with like your book idea, the 5 a.m. Miracle thing first, or did you develop that through the podcast?
I got pitched to write that book because of the podcast. So it was 18 months into the show that my publisher asked me to write a book. And I basically said, well, I'm going to use the content I've been discussing on the show and just kind of create a framework for that. And so the book is a direct output of the show. That's kind of, the power of podcasting. It can create all kinds of stuff. So
what would the book be about if we did a book about our show, Molly?
Molly doing way too many mushrooms, I feel would be like
And that's where I was going to go with it.
that would be the baseline. Be like, Molly's hallucinating again, and the other things. That would be it.
that'd be a good audiobook. Yeah.
I think that's the title. Molly's hallucinating again, and other things.
Other things.
The podcast club.
The podcast club.
The podcast club.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I have questions. So you've been podcasting, you have 10.7 million downloads. So is your podcast supporting your career? Is your podcast your career? Like I love that you've got a book out of it, because I talk to people about this all the time about like reverse engineering your content and creating that linear path. Do you want to write a book? Start with a podcast, transcribe it, copy and paste, get your framework, right? Create, content with intention, not just like, oh, I'm going to interview cool people. So it sounds like that was some of yours as well, but then at some point, like a real mission formed here. So I guess like my question is like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, did where you're at now, was that born from the podcast? Is that what is your main business, Jeff? Is it the podcast?
That I don't know. That's a whole other question. That's a big question. The basic answer. This whole thing really started like right after college when I discovered personal development. So I read a book from John Maxwell, and I discovered like there are people who write books and give speeches for a living. I didn't even know that was a thing. Like I was literally blown away that you could do that and get paid to do it. And so as soon as I saw John Maxwell doing that, I thought, well, I want to listen to podcasts, read books, watch documentaries, just consume the whole personal development world to figure out like what is it that's so appealing to me. And I discovered throughout that was what the career path I wanted, but I was in no way prepared for that yet. So I worked 5 or 6 years of just odd day jobs that I hated, all on the side, building a side business. That initially was a blog, that later on I launched the podcast, later on was the book and coaching and then speaking. And so these things just kind of stacked together over time, all with the intention of me eventually being full-time in that. But I went full-time on accident because the company I was working for went bankrupt. And so I was unemployed overnight and then realized, well, I have this side thing I've been doing. This is my chance to go full-time. Let's just do it. And that was 7 years ago. And so here I am.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
It worked out.
Really
I mean, really,
amazing.
it's bizarre because I would never have predicted, if someone asked me, Jeff, what do you want to do for a living when I was 10 years old or even in high school or even in college, the answer was, I'll get a job and then we'll see what happens. But like, I didn't even know the world of personal growth existed. I didn't know you could be a speaker for a living. I thought that I was going to eventually work as a teacher or something because I just didn't know what was out there. So once I discovered that and found that connection, it was just, well, I have to do this now. It's just such a good fit for me. And I have a degree in theater and psychology. I didn't want to be an actor and I didn't want to be a psychologist. So I was like, what do I do with this? Where does this go?
Become a politician.
Right. That was literally on my mind. I was like, I could do all kinds of weird things, but I don't really. Once I discovered like I have a passion for, at the very least, talking on a microphone, I thought I could work with that some way.
Well, those 2 degrees seem to be a pretty good starting point for podcasting. I mean,
yeah,
because you got to get the psychology for interviewing, the theater for speaking, and knowing how to engage an audience. That's pretty cool how all that just kind of flowed, and especially so early. I feel like because for so many of us, me included, I feel like this podcasting thing is like later on in my career, which I'm on like my 3rd or 4th career at this point. But it's cool. It's cool, and it's always inspiring to see people's path kind of just skyrocket. And the fact that you're not trying to tell.
In that sense, it's cool that I didn't plan this. It's just like I kept stacking things together and they kept kind of working, and then you mesh it all together, and I call it a business, but really it's just like I kind of do whatever I want all the time and hope that some of it makes money. Like that's not really a business. It's just a solopreneur thing.
Are you hiring? Like, what's up, man? I'm really good at that stuff.
Right. I mean, that's even my wife has asked me. It's like, Jeff, like, when are you gonna like get a real job? And I'm like, well, this is the real job, but there's like a caveat to it. Like, we'll get to it later. So,
that's what being an entrepreneur is, right?
Yeah. Basically, that's what I've learned that it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you just keep making mistakes until someone thinks you're a genius because it accidentally worked out, and you're like, totally plan that. I'm an outlier, ahead of my time. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean, both of the book deals that I had came from the podcast. I didn't reach out to publishers. Like, I get keynote speeches from people that find me. Like, I do very little outreach at this point because people just find me through the show for the most part, and so like I'm not as intentional as it probably looks on paper because I'm just kind of just guessing my way through, but still always going back to like, what do I enjoy doing? What do I think I'm good at? And that tends to always come back in some way to speaking. And so that for me has been like the centerpiece for all of this.
Well, so part of the magic too, I feel like, is your topic that you've chosen to focus on, the productivity, self development, all that sort of thing. That corner of the internet, not just podcasting, but in general, has a very avid following. So, if for other podcasts out there that might be thinking, well, I need to start a podcast, I want to try to monetize it, what should I be talking about? If you're starting off talking about films or something like that, or music, you got to be really, really different to kind of stand out in that space. And anyway, it's just interesting to think about.
Well, it's also interesting because podcasting is so much more competitive now. Like when I first launched my show, like I feel like I probably got a lot of attention I didn't really deserve because the space wasn't as developed as it is today. And so now, like my podcast, like doesn't rank in Apple like it used to because there's just so many other shows out there. I mean, most don't last that long, but still having to weed through the noise of all the new shows that are out there, it's it's not the same space it was before. So.
Yeah, and it's like anything, right? Being an early adapter or adopter of like any technology. Like I was on Facebook years ago, was hired by a bar to do social media for them, but this was like 10 years ago. Yeah. And then it was straight up predatory. Like I could search for like second year college students that go to the colleges near the bars and then just full on friend request them. And then I would send out hundreds of them. And then I'd go back the next week and then friend request all the people who had mutual friends of the people that had accepted my request. And I did that neighborhood by neighborhood. And then like I kind of got out of that game, but I did it so early that it's like I would get like, 100, 200 friend requests a day and I accepted all of them, So at the end of it, I had this crazy network of the most random people on my Facebook list, and I still do. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, where the hell did you come from 9 years ago? But in the beginning, there's no like rules, right? And you're getting a lot of attention because you're kind of the only one doing it. But I still think there's like a ton of value, right? Like, I don't know. I kind of think ratings and rankings are bullshit, right? I think if you're impacting people and it's getting the job done, like this TikTok mentality of you have to have 1 million eyes or 1 million views or 1 million downloads on iTunes. Like, okay, what? Could you handle 1 million new customers? Could you handle 10% of 1 million new customers tomorrow? No. Why do you care about, right, these huge numbers? I think it's really about creating the content and building those blocks, and then that's why we're slow rolling it. You know what I mean? We don't want too big of an audience at one time. I don't.
That's why.
For sure. So I'm also really curious, Jeff. Like, it took me a long time. I'm definitely in that like personal development mode. I read like 40 books over the last 2.5 years. Like everything Tim Ferriss has ever done, all that, right? Like absorbing that content, but it took me a long time. I was like 43 when I got on that journey. Like I'm super impressed that you had the wherewithal in your 20s to be on that. I mean, I was at like dead shows and like, God, I'm not gonna say what else I was doing in my 20s. I think we all know based on what I've been doing in my 40s. But how did you get turned in, onto that world? Because that's I just really didn't give a shit about any of that at 20. I didn't have enough of a worldview to even realize that personal development needed to happen or existed. I think it might also be an age difference too. Like when I was in my 20s, it was the 90s and we didn't have cell phones and things like that. So it was a little different. But like what turned you on to all of that?
Have you seen the documentary The Vow that came on HBO recently about the sex cult? So no. I feel like in my early 20s, I was so impressionable, I could have been in a cult, like looking back at it. And I got lucky that I had a boss who was really into personal growth and handed me a book by John Maxwell, who has ethics. And had somebody handed me a book about joining a cult, I would have been like, let's do it. I was just really into whatever somebody else was excited about. And I didn't have a path. Like I had my first blog after college was called Graduated and Clueless, because that was exactly how I felt. And so I got lucky that my boss was into John Maxwell. I read the book because of him. And then that was it. Just one book. And I was just like on a whole new path because I saw this spark, like there was something really intriguing about that. I think for the most part too, because I had read a lot of books in college because I was forced to. And this was the first one I really wanted to read. Like I really wanted to get into it. And all of a sudden I saw this like drive in me that I hadn't seen on most of the things I had done. And so it was really like I was just curious, like, what am I into? What can I explore to find out more about life? And so that led later on to me running a lot of marathons and changing my diet radically and like testing the waters for like what else can I do. And so for me, personal growth was just that question of like what is possible for me, and that's what I've been exploring ever since.
That's amazing.
That's
That's
awesome.
how I felt when I quit smoking cigarettes after like 20 years. I'd had spinal surgeries and they were like, your bones won't fuse. You have to quit. And I was like, do you know how stressed out I am? I need a fucking cigarette. Are you kidding me? I had and it was so hard. It was so hard to quit, but I finally did it. And then after that, I was like, well, shit, I wonder what else I can do. You know, that might have been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, what's next? And then I just went on this journey of challenging myself in all kinds of crazy ways because I was like, I did that. So I respect that. That's awesome. Go Jeff, man. You're living
Well,
the
it's similar
dream,
to when I ran my first marathon. I remember it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the first one. And I finished it. And like 5 minutes later, my wife was there and she was like, do you like want to just like quit running forever? Because you look miserable. And at that moment, I was like, no, I'm doing another one as soon as possible. And like, I was like in pain. I was like crying. I was in so much pain. But I was like, no, this is happening again. And like that led to me running multiple marathons. I ran ultra marathons because I kept getting that bug of like, well, how far can I go? Like, what else can I push to? Which is that's a real addiction. There's that idea of just like keep pushing the envelope. I mean, there was another kind of bigger story here, which is that 3 years ago, I ended up in the ER with a panic attack because I'm the kind of guy who pushes so hard. Like I don't have the off button. And so I've had to learn that the hard way. But that's a whole different discussion. If we want to go there, we can. But yeah, there's a lot to say about just, challenging yourself.
I could dig it, man. I rode my bike 100 miles to the beach one time. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Straight up. Yeah. 9 hours. 9 hours.
What ultra marathon?
There's
did you
one
run?
here in Nashville.
I'm
That's
super
called the
curious.
Nashville Ultra Marathon, and you can choose between 50K up to 50 miles, and I chose the 50K, the shortest possible one, just to call it an ultra. I later on ran a longer distance. It was 31 miles. It's still
30
something.
miles, everyone.
My longest run ever, actually, I ran near Marcus
no
around
joke.
Franklin. I made up a route on my own, and the goal was to run 40 miles that day. I made it 36, and I collapsed on the side of the road. I had to call my wife and be like, I'm stuck.
man.
I look homeless. People are staring at me and pointing, like, please come get me. Like, so, yeah. It's fun.
I don't even think I could walk 31
awesome.
miles in a day.
No.
For real.
No, definitely not.
real.
People do walk them. You can do that. It's just a fast walk.
Yeah.
So,
It's basically walk. Yeah.
well, when you're doing
it's out
ultra
there.
running, most of it's walking anyway because your legs don't work
Yep.
anymore. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's wild. So your podcast, let's get back to the podcast.
Sure,
part.
sure.
I could go down that running rabbit hole with you, but we'll focus back on the podcasting thing.
Yeah.
No pun
So what's
intended.
10 million downloads in now? Like what's a day in the life? Like how are you doing it now? Like what's it, how are you keeping it fresh and how are you like driving new listeners? You said it's competitive in the Apple sphere, even though you've been around for before the boom, we'll call it. You've been in
Right.
it for a while. So what are you doing now to keep it rolling and keep getting new listeners?
There's one aspect of podcasting I've never understood, which is actually where my listeners come from, in the sense that like I have the download data for my hosts, which just tells me the browsers they're using or the apps that they're on, but I don't actually know what keeps them coming back consistently. So, I mean, I produce my show and I can see the downloads are about the same every month after month, year after year. Like, I'm not necessarily growing the show a ton, but I'm not dying either. So it's kind of hovering and has been for a while. I think in part, like I can see, if I'm a guest on another podcast, I will see a little bump. Like I'll get some more listeners from that. Or if I get like a guest blog post or something, like I'll do some of those things. For the most part, though, the vast majority of what I do is just keep producing content. Like I'm not quitting. And I feel like just the perseverance aspect has what's allowed me to stay relevant, to keep the downloads coming, to keep listeners still there. Because most people just quit. And I didn't quit. I've been doing the weekly show for 8 years, and that takes a lot of work every week, nonstop. So I think a big part of it is
when
that.
did it happen? Like when did it go from, you were just trying this thing, and when did you notice that you're like, oh shit, like I gotta keep doing this thing, like it's working now. Like when was that moment?
It was 3 months in. I got featured in The Art of Manliness, which is it's a
Holy
pretty
cow.
big podcast now. They featured me in a list of the top 24 podcasts for men. And I was like number 22 on this list, like very bottom of the list. My show was only 3 months
That's
old.
amazing.
And one of their writers had listened to my show very early on, and it was bad early on. So the fact they listed my show is pretty amazing. And my numbers just blew up. Like, I went from probably 2,000 downloads a month to like 10,000 in a month, and then just kept escalating from then on out because I was doing more interviews and more features. But that was the initial big bump was from them. And I'm sure I still get traffic from that even now. So it's still working out pretty well in that sense.
And then at what point did you start getting sponsors?
That happened about, when was that? 2016. So 3 years into the show. I had someone approach me for that. And so that's when I realized, like, if people are asking me for it, there's probably a big enough audience at that point. Because I think I just hit the 8,000 downloads per episode bump. And like usually they say 10,000 is the number you go for. You're to do the CPM model. So I just reached 8,000. I started doing some ads. I got to 10,000 later on. And so that was, I've been doing ads basically every single week since then. So 5 years now.
That's awesome.
Are you recording your own ads, or are you doing like any DIA module type stuff these days?
It is all me all the time. I tested very briefly having ads inserted into my show, and I hated it immediately. It was just, it sucked the life out of my podcast. And so I realized that people come to my show maybe for the content, but they stay because they like me, and I cannot turn them away with just terrible ads. And so generally speaking, people like my ads, which I think is weird because I think they're horribly annoying, but it's me talking, so they still like it. And in theory, I'm offering content that's related to my show. I'm not just picking random, companies. I'm trying to keep it as centered as possible to my content. So to a certain degree, the ads fit. And it's the part of the show I hate the most is the ads, but they pay. And so until I have more revenue streams, the ads are not going anywhere for a while.
And are you actively looking for like take me into that world? Because I'm trying to figure out if I want to, how to market in podcasts and stuff like that. So how does one come to you? How does that happen? How do you do that?
The majority of the ads that come to me come through agencies. And so I work with Advertise quite a bit. I have been exclusive in the past with multiple companies, and being exclusive with agencies is a trap. And I do not recommend that. Mm-hmm. The general flow is that if you sign a direct deal with a company and they own all your ads, they will control a lot of what the show becomes, or they at least give their opinion too much. Like, I'm a control freak. It's just, I want my show to be my show. And so at the end of the day, I don't want somebody else's opinion unless it's just an opinion and I can consider it. And it always felt really controlling. And the fact that I couldn't sell my own ads because they were the ones to go through. Mm-hmm. And so I dropped those deals. I've gone back and forth on that multiple times. And I've come to the conclusion finally that I am better off as like the driver of everything. So I have multiple agencies that are non-exclusive, including Advertise, Podcorn, Gumball, and I had Libsyn for a little while when I was on Libsyn as a host. But the majority of what I bring in now is just self-generated ads. So I will reach out to companies, usually ones that I've heard on other shows. So I'll listen to other podcasts I know have ads, and I'll figure out which companies are sponsoring shows, and I'll just directly contact them. And that's been really effective, as opposed to finding companies who don't even know how to advertise on a podcast. That is a bad idea because it's a ton of work. They don't have a budget. They don't want to pay you. They want to fight with you and everything. You're looking for companies who understand what podcast ads are, how they work. They have a budget for it. They have this person in charge of that department. All of that makes it 1,000 times easier. And then I can just kind of get in, get the deal, make it happen. So there's a process for it, but it's really about just controlling your show your way. And if you want to give up control, that's choice, but it's not for me.
Well, I feel like you and I are a lot alike, especially when it comes to the panic attacks, and which we can talk about at some point maybe.
Sure.
But the control, like I can see, just because of the quality of what you're doing on every level, that you're a perfectionist, probably like I am.
Yeah.
And along with that comes the control freak stuff that you mentioned. So, getting to one of the main reasons why I wanted you to join our show, besides all this stuff that's been great that we've already talked about, Apple, we've already talked about this on a previous episode, but Apple pretty much shit the bed with their new version of the platform with this new subscription service that they're offering. It has, for those who didn't hear that episode, I mean, and it's weird because not a lot of people are talking about it outside of our circles. And I don't understand why, but there are a lot of shows that went missing, and yours was one of them.
Yes.
So I want
to.
Yes. So tell us of the saga that you had, and I didn't know that you used to work at an Apple store, so that must have been even like a knife in the heart.
There are so many.
I gave you
so
the
many things I
best
could say
part
here.
of 21, year 21. I deserve more.
Yeah, well, that whole thing was funny too, because when I worked at the Apple store, there was this real sense of like I'm a part of this like really cool club. Like I felt like I had hit the jackpot because like I was hanging out with really fun people who were really smart, who understood technology, who were like super happy to help people. Like the Apple store I worked at was exactly what you think Apple should be. Like it was like the fun, hip people in the commercials, like dancing for no reason. Like that was my store. Like it was exactly what you think it should be. Talking to Apple podcast support is not at all what that is. It is 100% different. Like they are nightmares to talk to. And like I hope they hear this because I have bitched them out. This is, pardon my French. I have just like given them my full opinion so many times, and they don't care. Like they have a very specific, just like we're gonna do things this way, deal with it attitude. And so for the last 7 to 8 years with my show, I've talked to them very little until the last year. I talked to them a little bit more because I had some questions, and then these last few months has been just back and forth, just constant talking because I'm just trying to get more out of them for what is happening, and they don't want to say anything. The issues I've had, though, are resolved right now. I don't have any current problems, but what happened initially was if you were trying to find my podcast in Apple Podcasts, if you search for my name or the name of the show, nothing would come up. So it was not on any charts. It was not available. It would just have an error message. So we didn't find anything. If you went to the direct link that Apple provides for every show, you get the same error message. Like nothing was there. But if you were subscribed to the show, you still got the downloads. You still got the new content. So it was really weird because my download numbers didn't really change, but the visibility of the show was just non-existent. And I was getting emails from listeners asking why they couldn't find my show because they don't subscribe. They just like tune in occasionally and click a download button. And so there was just this goofiness about it. And of course, nothing was said publicly. Apple wouldn't talk about it at all. It was just people like us asking what's going on and getting no response. So that went on. I mean, my show went offline, so to speak, at least 3 different times that I know of, and then would just come back on without warning. I had no access to log into Apple Podcast Connect, so I couldn't change anything. It was just, frustrating, to say the very least.
So basically, it's like dating in 2021 is what you're telling me. You never really know what's going on. You can't tell if they're in the game or not.
Yeah.
That's
being
crazy.
ghosted by Apple.
So when your show went offline, did your sponsors like hit you up like, yo, bro, what's up, man? We need a refund for that last week. Like, did you have any issues? Maybe not specifically that
The
conversation.
sponsors
but did you
didn't
have
really
any issues?
notice. The thing is, the sponsor, this is the thing about podcast sponsors. Generally speaking, they're not paying attention to anything. They don't listen to the ads. They don't care. They're weirdly not connected to their own thing, their own money being spent. They don't even care. So that's a whole different discussion. But no, the sponsors didn't care. Actually, I told my agencies myself that the show was offline, and then they went and looked for it. And I also told them, like, and as a heads up, lots of shows have the same problem. I mean, Michael Hyatt's show went offline. He's a huge podcast. His show was gone too. Like it wasn't just me. And so I was trying to get the word out as being like, a lot of people here are getting hit with a problem that nobody's talking about publicly, and we're all just stuck waiting and hoping something will be fixed. So,
yeah, I know Evo Terra's show went offline too, and it makes me wonder because none of my clients' shows, which have all started just within the past 4 years, I think is the oldest one that I helped launch. I'm wondering if part of the problem was all of the original, all the OG shows, that like yours and like Michael Hyatt's and like Evo's that because I don't know that I've seen anybody that has a younger show that had that problem that you guys had.
that's true.
But
And the
we'll
ones
never
that I
know
saw
because-
were established shows with lots of listeners and lots of episodes over many years. So, yeah.
See, the cynic in me that Loki hates Apple is just like, there's something more to this story. Like, right? Like, I don't know. I just find them to be like so unaccountable for like, I don't know, the destruction of the planet, their slave labor, all the things that they're responsible for. But, it's just kind of weird. It's just kind of weird how they're so quiet, and I think it's just so disappointing. They're so unaccountable because they've made so much money. Like, Apple is music and podcasts, and then like radio stations apparently, but I'm not sure anybody listens to those, right? Like, but like they've made, a huge name for themselves off of other people's content and haven't given a dime for it in so many years. And I just feel like there's more to like, why did the bigger names go off? Like we looked, ours was there, thank God we were, sleepless night there. Let me tell you. Hearts were racing when we pulled that search up, but
right?
How come all these big players are gone? I don't know. I don't trust any of it. You know what I mean? I believe half of everything, and I trust half of everyone. That's
and especially because Apple, I mean, essentially, we wouldn't have podcasts probably at the point that they're at now without Apple, because the iPod
They're
is
the
what.
pod.
Yeah. That's what made podcasts possible back in the early 2000s when they first became a thing.
Well, and Apple and Podbean, let's not forget Podbean. They're the OGs for real. Like if you wanted to start a podcast, you started with Podbean and you put it on Apple. That was really, right? Is that what you did, Jeff, back in the day?
Mine was through iWeb. I used Apple's iWeb
I did
service.
that too.
Super old school now. I had a goofy website that they helped me build sort of with the software. My first website that actually launched was tessaandjeff.com for my wedding. And so I used that as the vehicle to kind of figure out like how, that's when I started blogging. My very first blog post was talking about my upcoming wedding. And so that was kind of how I got started into that world through Apple's iWeb software, which I, tinkered with a lot and really liked it. And that I think is why I'm so disappointed in what's happened, because they were like, that's how I started, was using their software, working for their company, knowing that the iPod was such a huge influence. Like they've owned podcasting and just like pissed away the responsibility. And I just do not understand how, and they're trying to monetize now, I guess, with the service-based, system, but it took them 20 years to get around to caring. And if they're going to care now, I'm not even sure they will. So I don't know.
Yeah, because compared to all their other services and apps and all that stuff, it's like podcasting is, chump change to them, I'm sure.
Right.
But, it's, and there's been a lot of people, a lot of journalists that have said that it seems like podcasting is more of a hobby for Apple than it's not
right.
But for us, it's not a hobby. This is our business. This is our livelihood. And so to have because what percentage of your listeners use Apple Podcasts to listen to your app?
The direct download numbers for that is about 75%. It come directly through some form of either the Apple desktop, mobile app. I guess Apple Watch is not. That was a double download for a while, but like they use an Apple direct service for that. But then all the indirect apps that pull from Apple itself, I guarantee you 90% of my show comes from Apple, if not more than 90%. And so the fact that they have a huge monopoly over the industry and they just don't care about it is so bizarre, because I feel like they could have been monetizing this and putting people on it and caring about it for such a long time and giving the attention to it that they give to everything else. And they have the money. That's not a question. So like, I just don't get the lack of attention to it. So
as you're saying, it's interesting because it's like you think about music and download. Like there's a marketplace for those things. You transact on music. You buy music. You buy apps. They have their hands all over it. Podcasting from the get has been this more open source sort of thing. It's always kind of been the free airwaves. It's always so like you could always get around the gateway. That's if Molly hadn't dropped off just now because her internet probably sucks down in wherever the hell she is. That's probably what she'd say she loves about podcasting, is just that there was no gatekeeper and that it was just wide open. You could do what you did. You could start up and be like, hey, I'm podcasting today, and here we go. And you all can listen to me if you find me. And so, like, in thinking like Apple, it's like, okay, well, who's going to pay for our shit before you could really like dive into it. There wasn't the marketplace for it. Now you have freemium, you have all these other things out there that have allowed for the potential for there to be, I guess, a monetization side of it, but it's still like, for in their scheme of things, definitely probably the least profitable endeavor, least profitable app they could have their hands in until the like now everyone's like, oh, podcast. So like now it's like it's the right time for it, but yeah, they obviously like fumbled the football at the end zone right there, just like, hey, here we go. Just wait a minute.
I just find it weird that podcasting is a subscription model. Like, people listen consistently, and so you can charge people consistently. And that's the thing that tech people love the most, is to charge someone every month. Like, why would you miss that? There's money everywhere in here. I just don't get it.
They literally had the app for it. Where have you been, Apple? Like, you had the whole thing is right there. It's a little purple app. You did it. What are you doing?
They totally missed the boat for sure.
Missed it. Missed it big time. That's wild.
Yeah.
But man, so now it's all cool.
It has been for the last couple of weeks. I got an email from one of their senior people who told me to, like, we're going to, fix this stuff very soon, so just wait. And then they sent that email to everyone basically saying, like, we've resolved the issues. And when that email came out, that's exactly when I noticed my show was back online and working. So it was as if whatever bug they had, I think they realized they fixed it, and then they sent the email, which is the most communication I've had from them on anything. So that's something. Still not anything to talk about, but like it got me to where I am now, which is my show actually works. I just hope they
Apple
actually
and Spotify, like what's your feel there?
In terms of
Apple
will Spotify like compete with them, or
like are you just like Apple all the way? Like there's no chance. Or where are you at?
I don't see a competitor to Apple actually taking a chunk from their business for a long time, because they own too much of it. There's too many apps that have built their entire business pulling from the Apple directory. So unless there's another more reliable source that's like clearly better because they have like some offer that everybody really needs in podcasting, but then of course I think Apple will just copy that anyway. Like I don't see. It's kind of like YouTube owns videos. Like, I don't go anywhere else to watch online video.
Right.
And I think
you
that
never
Apple
go to
is that.
Vimeo to watch a video.
Right.
Someone sends you a link and you end up there and you're like, what is this? Why am I here?
It's usually a film student or something like that, or
the creative types.
Videographer.
You mean you guys haven't been watching those Vimeo live shows that are, storming the industry?
Is that a thing?
What now?
Vimeo Live.
Is that where you went, Molly? You had to dip off to get your blue cocktail.
I did. Ooh, yeah. I did. This is actually pea flower tea. It's not as exciting as it looks. At least that's what they told me at the gas station. I'm just kidding. I didn't buy it. That would be sketchy. Oh man, yeah. Welcome back. I got lost there for a second. I don't know what happened. We'll have to shame Riverside.
Glad you made it back.
We had a rousing conversation. So what is your tech stack? I guess that's the techie term. What do you use? Like what else are you using to like make this thing happen?
As far as all the gear I've got here,
besides gear, but like I mean, I'm sure Marcus probably rattled off the gear that you have, but like it looks fairly similar, at least from what we can see.
Mm-hmm.
But after the gear, like what's your how do you podcast? Like what software do you use? What are you hosting it on? Like what's your jam? All
my editing is in Audition, which I learned that originally from Cliff Ravenscraft, which has been great because Audition is awesome. I've toyed around with Logic and GarageBand and others, but Audition has always been one I've really just felt good with. My podcast host has shifted a few times now. I began with Libsyn and was there for 6 years, and then I got offered the chance to do an exclusive deal with Advertise Cast for ads, and as part of that deal, they paid for me to be hosted on Megaphone. And Megaphone has dynamic ads, and so that was the first time I got the chance to have the opportunity to insert someone else's content. But what I actually ended up using it for was my own promotions. So that's what I primarily use all that for now. And then I shifted recently over to Art19. So I'm still having dynamic ads as part of my setup, but they're not actually ads. They're just promos for my book, for my other courses. So I insert those into the back catalog. So my ads that someone will purchase will be live for 30 days, and then I pull them, and then it gets inserted into it's just my stuff. People don't understand the method I'm using because it's not traditional, but I kind of relate to the idea that if you watch, Seinfeld today, you're not going to see ads from the 90s, right? If you listen to my podcast from 5 years ago, you're not going to hear an ad from 5 years ago. You're going to hear an ad from today. And the podcast ad world doesn't get that yet. The norm is to insert an ad forever. It's evergreen.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense to me. It's the most illogical thing in the world because the links that they promote in the ads are broken. The coupon codes don't exist. The companies go bankrupt. It doesn't have any logic behind it. It's a easier sell up front, but the companies don't get that like they're going to mess up this process down the road. So I changed all that. So long story short, I'm on Art 19
Is that
now.
a manual process?
Yes. So every my ads go live weekly. So basically once a week, I'll take the episode that just hit the 30-day mark of being live, and then I swap out the episode that I have in my host with an ad-free version of that, and then set the ad markers so I can insert dynamic ads into that. So I do that myself once a week. It takes me all of 15 minutes. So it's easy to do and gives me the chance to then have whatever ads I want to go live in the entire back catalog. And since I have 420 episodes on my feed, that means the 4 most recent have current ads, and the 416 before that have my dynamic ads. So I'm getting a whole lot more attention to those back catalog dynamic insertions.
Have you ever thought about taking the most popular downloaded episode, which sometimes is not the most recent, and then maybe selling ads and reinserting new ads in from third parties?
I've actually sold back catalog dynamic ads before, only a couple of times, but that'll be the entire thing. I've never sold directly to just like the most downloaded episodes. For me, that's always episode number 1. That tends to get by far the most. People go back to the very beginning and start there. And so besides the 4 most recent, the very next one is episode number 1. And so I know people's behavior is they get hooked on a recent episode, they go back to the very beginning and just start downloading. And so I think that a lot of my download numbers are people just kind of getting crazy with their, download all button, which is, if that's what they're doing, that's awesome for my numbers, but kind of fake for how big the audience might be. So,
and that's actually brings us back around to the Apple messing up the platform, because I feel like part of what I've read about what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it so that you get, as a podcaster, you get a better sense of if people are actually listening to the show. So like on YouTube, you see who watched it and you can see where people stopped watching or, all that stuff. And you can do that within the app analytics for Apple, but it doesn't include everybody else that doesn't use the Apple Podcasts app.
Right.
For you, it's only 25% of your audience, apparently, but which is amazing because for most of us, it's like 50 to 60% are Apple. And so we'd have to log into Podcast Connect to view just the Apple stats to see that type of YouTube data where we can see where the listeners drop off, as opposed to just download numbers, which is what our hosts show us. And that's what advertisers are going off of. And so what Apple has started doing, according to James Cridland from Pod News, is they're no longer just letting people that subscribe in the Apple Podcasts app grab the RSS feed and direct download from our servers, from our hosts. What they're doing now is that index that you would get the link to the show if you're not subscribed, that's the thing that went down for you and for all these other shows that disappeared, that now is going to be the primary delivery system for everybody. Even if you subscribe to the show, you're still having to wait on Apple's index to update. So that supposedly, I don't know if this is part of it or not, but it makes sense in my head at least that they're trying to see if they can get a more accurate figure of who's actually listening instead of these download numbers, because people can game the system just to try to monetize their podcast. So I don't know, that's just where my brain's gone with all that. But you would think Apple would be better prepared, and like, it's obviously a big undertaking to do what they did, but they're one of the biggest companies in the world. Why did
someone got fired that day?
Yeah, I
Well, they
hope.
can't get everybody to come back to their fancy spaceship office. I think
Right.
that's part of the problem. They're like, no, really, guys, we're open, and they're like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody on Facebook about this issue when I was like ranting online about how mad I was about it. And I was relating it to when Apple Maps was first launched and one of their VPs got fired because Apple Maps was a disaster when it first came out and people were getting lost in the desert. And like, I was relating that to this, only that got a lot of attention and this disaster just didn't get noticed at all. And I was just like, how are we not discussing this on a grander scale? Like, why is this not on CNN? Like, that's what I want to see. And like,
Apple
they don't
got
care.
better.
Like, it's not important enough. So.
Hold on. Have you used Apple Maps recently? Because I'm not sure that they actually got any better.
I never use Apple Maps.
It has.
Never have. Never will. No.
It
I
has
use
gotten
Maps
better.
only.
Trust me. Now that you have CarPlay, even.
No, I still have Google Maps as my default when I jump to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Interesting.
kind of heathen are you, Marcos? You're using
I'm all in. I'm all in on the Apple stuff, even when they piss me off. I'm still.
Well, I mean, everything I own is
anyway.
Apple. There's no doubt that I'm an Apple fanboy. You know, I'll die with an Apple logo probably somewhere in my body. But it's like that's. But I think because I care so much, that's why I'm so angry. You know, it's like that's why I want to see them like actually meet the bar that they set for themselves, which they do with everything.
Because they
else.
don't seem to care. Yeah.
Right. So it's just one of those cases where I hope
a
that
hard
they get together.
year. You know, it's like Brene Brown says, everybody's doing the best they can. You know what I'm saying? We gotta.
That's not true. No, they're not.
Not the Apple Podcast team. The pandemic is no excuse for the Apple Podcast.
Yeah, just
team.
because it's been a year of despair, trauma, and obliteration doesn't mean anybody should get a day off. Okay.
Exactly.
Goodness me.
But even not to
And-
publicly acknowledge it, other than that just brief sentence in the email. I was trying to find that email just to read that sentence, but it was like, this is the only way you're going to acknowledge there was even a problem. Oh man,
Yeah,
I
it's
should
rough.
look up your
but
Facebook post.
Hopefully, it'll get fixed and we'll all be better for it. But I also hope they redo the Apple Podcast app itself. I think the app is still very confusing and not nearly as simple as it could be. So
Yeah, that. Well, especially because when Congress and Senate, whoever they're all like all these antitrust things going on right now, and like they're trying to break up the monopolies. It's in the news today. They're trying to break up these, and
Right.
and if there's anything that Apple's been doing, right, it's been collecting our data. They might not have given it to the police, but they've been collecting it. Why is it like the holy grail trying to get your like download stats from Apple? Like, why is it so hard? Somebody just got an elevator and it's from 1922. So
There's an RX filter for that, right? Right, Matt? Jeff gets me. See?
I do. I do now. I didn't. That joke would have got right past me just a few months ago. So there you go.
I can relate.
Well, I mean, this is
man.
the joke I've been having for the last year and a half. Like since day one of meeting Marcus, it's like I need to get the Marcus credit card because I just keep buying things. RX-8. Luckily, I got the standard version, not the Pro, because I was like tempted to do that. But it's like I need to stop like all that.
Yeah. I even started out with RX Elements, so
There you go.
anyway. It's a rabbit hole for sure, and I'm going down another one with condenser mics now, which we talked about last week, and I want to spend $1,000 on a new microphone that I don't need
Yeah.
because I have a problem. Hi,
I just
Marcus.
sold two
Oh,
microphones
Marcus.
actually recently. I never sold any of my gear until the last week. I sold two microphones because
Did
Nice.
you autograph them?
I should have.
Dude, Jeff, you missed an opportunity. We're like,
That's
oh,
true.
the autograph, that's free. That's it.
The
Yeah.
Jeff Sanders signature Sennheiser was a 416. Is that what you sold?
I still have the 416. I like that
Oh,
one.
okay.
It's the fancier one. I spent more money on that one than most other mics combined.
Yeah.
So, I sold the Sennheiser ME66, which is another short shotgun mic that I never used,
Yeah.
and I sold my old Heil
Real
PR40, which I used for 7 years in the show. But
Nice.
I
Wow.
no longer have a need for it because this bad boy took its place. So that's where I'm at.
Did you get anybody commenting on your new sound at least? Like
My
I'm sure people
father-in-law
could see
actually just told me. He
Really?
listens to my show by just playing it off of his iPhone, off the speaker, And he was commenting, he was like, I listened to your episode recently, and I can't believe how I can actually understand what you're saying. I can hear what you're talking about, because other people, you can't understand them because the quality is so bad. And I think it's fascinating. So
that's the ultimate compliment. You win.
I guess so. It worked.
Well,
that's it.
What was he doing to all the other episodes when he couldn't understand what you were saying? He was just like,
I think it's just noise in the background, just something to have on.
Right.
And he's retired.
Just
it's just like
his
whatever.
son-in-law with the download.
Just white noise. Right.
It's like Oprah on the TV 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Or murder mysteries, like every white woman over 40 who's obsessed with watching television shows about killing their husbands. It's kind of the same thing, I think. Just saying, you guys should probably keep an eye on that in your own homes. You know what I'm saying? If you come home and wife is on the murder your husband channel every night, it's might want to have a sit down. You know what I'm saying? Or stop buying microphones. One of the two.
That's an idea.
Just saying.
But yeah, the next
Well,
role I'm going to try and
other-
dive into is going to be voiceover work. So I may end up buying more microphones for that too. So we'll see if that goes somewhere. But yeah, it's fun.
Well, your 416 is a great device for that, for voiceover stuff. That's what a lot of voiceover
But I need a
pros
whisper
use.
room because I cannot use that thing anywhere.
That's true.
It's so
That's true.
sensitive.
Especially with
it picks up the
second
friggin' like
child
my
on the
neighbors
way.
in their house. Like they can hear everything. That's a crazy mic.
Yeah, you're about to have a second kid too, so that's even
right.
more noise to reject.
And the fun part's going to be that her crib is going to be right here. So for about the first 3 months, no. But then after that, she's going to live in here for probably a year.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to be doing videos with a crib behind me. So it's working from home is such a strange thing. I don't know why I chose this life. Yeah.
That's a challenge.
That's going to be something.
On many levels.
I'll try to make sure
You
that
can
baby's
hang a
not
green
there.
screen from it.
Yeah,
There you go.
You could put and then turn it into an aquarium and be like, oh, that's not a crib. That's my super baller aquarium with a
That's my
shark
fish
in it.
making sounds back
That's
there.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
clearly. Is that a shark with a laser, you ask? Yes, it is.
of course.
Laser shark.
What else would it be?
Exactly. Well, Jeff, this has been super awesome, man. You're really interesting, and I'm gonna go listen to your podcast now. I'm hooked.
Well, good. It's fun. Yeah, it's still fun to do, even 8 years into it. I mean, I think the more that I get into like nerding out on making the show better, I mean, I think Marcus is scratching that itch in the sense of like just learning more, digging into things further. It's still fun.
Cool.
That's awesome. And you do this show weekly, huh?
Yeah,
That's a lot of work.
And do you take any breaks? Do you do like seasons? Do you build in any breaks at all? Holidays, or you just like go hard?
I shifted from weekly to every other week for about 6 months when my first daughter was born. I did that just to kind of lessen my workload because I was, first time dad. I wanted a little more free time. But aside from that, my show has gone live every single Monday morning for the last 8 years. I don't abide by like a U.S. holiday schedule because I have a 40% international audience. That comes in. It's like they don't care about U.S. holidays, so
Right.
I don't abide by that at all. So
Right on.
cool.
That's
Way
impressive.
cool.
Yeah.
Way cool.
You hear that level of commitment, fellas?
That's right.
One
hardcore,
day,
What are you
hardcore.
trying to say, Molly?
one day, that could be us.
Adam's just trying to run a retail enterprise.
I know. Right?
And I have
No
my
big deal.
XLR cables are from Adam actually, so thank you for those.
Nice.
Hey.
Yeah.
Best,
There you go.
best cables in the business.
They're good.
Speaking of which, Adam, I'm building a new studio in DC, but I've also decided to build a new studio in Detroit.
What?
Badass.
December 1.
Nice.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Branching
Going
out.
Heartcast Media, Detroit. Motor City. Pedal City.
Nice.
That's what they call it now, not Motor
Pedal
City.
City. Okay.
Yeah, they build bikes now, not motorcycles, so they're doing a rebrand. You know what I'm saying? Pedal
cool.
City. Do you know all
There you
the like Divvy bikes and the City Share bikes that are built around the country that are built like tanks? They're all made in Detroit now. So they literally have brought back manufacturing, but they're manufacturing bicycles and bike parts and bike frames and things like that. And so it's just interesting to see the maturity of Detroit and what's going on there. But yeah, Detroit, Heartcast Media Detroit, December 1. So I'll be buying some Chuck Levin's XLR cables pretty soon too. Some more, I should say, Chuck Levin's. XLR
You don't have
cable.
like a stash of them in your somewhere.
Of everywhere and everything I own. I'm like, why did I bring 8 XLR cords to Costa Rica and 1 microphone? Like, it's just years of doing AV. I'm like, well, what if they all break?
Yeah. You got to have a backup.
That's true.
Always.
Yeah, speaking of which, I still haven't gotten the microphone that you shipped me 2
What?
months ago. Yeah. They're like, just come down and give us your fingerprints. I was like, not falling for that one again. Never forget what happened the last time they told me that, you know.
Well, doesn't seem like I'll be shipping too much to Costa Rica.
No. Yeah. I had to show my passport and like it's very complicated. Very
I was trying to get
complicated.
a microphone for a friend of a friend to Iceland, and it's like just crazy expensive to get stuff. They're really isolated up there
Whole
too.
different game.
Yeah.
Well, so
international
what
shipping.
you do, which is kind of cool, right? There's like Sherpa groups on Facebook. And so that's what you do. You go in there and you say, hey, is anybody coming to Costa Rica in the next 2 weeks? And then you just like ship the microphone to that person. And then they fly in and you meet them at the airport or you go to their house. And so some people do it off of like the kindness of their own heart, you know, and other people are like, pay me, you know, and I'm not mad at that because it's still way cheaper and 10 times faster than actually shipping something here.
Yeah.
And so, and then you also aren't paying those crazy high customs import taxes because they don't put taxes on the stuff inside your suitcases.
Wow.
Right.
So there's
Sharp.
there's probably a Iceland Sherpa Facebook group too.
Yeah. I'll have to check
Just
it
saying.
out.
You know, it's amazing how people can kind of come together, and some people are making money off it, but some people are just like, you know, my dad has Alzheimer's, and so I have a soft spot, and I'll bring your Alzheimer's meds to you or whatever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like people are just doing it because they're decent people, and so it's kind of cool to be like, oh wow, look, an unregulated group of people just being nice and helping each other out. Like, oh, maybe there's hope for us
On Facebook,
after all. I know, on Facebook.
of all places.
I know. Stranger things have happened. That's for sure. So yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show. We had some other like, you know, fun things to chat about, like the Himalaya $100 million, delusional money pit.
We'll
that
save
doesn't
that for
actually
next
exist.
week.
Yeah, we have some good drama, but like your conversation was so much more interesting than any of the links that I had pulled. So
And
thanks for coming
informative.
on the show, Jeff. You know, we
Oh,
definitely.
thank you. It was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it'd be really awesome if you came back again and did an episode with Brian Barletta, because when you were saying that you don't like DIA, I could just imagine Brian Barletta like just rolling over like
The
repeatedly
great
down
battle.
a hill.
We'll all just like dissipate into the and just let them go at it.
I know. It'd
Do you
be
know
great.
Brian? Jeff?
No, and I don't
know
fight
Brian?
too often, but you know, if I have to,
No,
I
no,
will.
no.
So
No fighting. I would just love to see, because like, you know,
More of a friendly battle.
Yeah. He's a big component of DIA, and he does a newsletter for Pod News called Sounds Profitable. And
Yeah.
he's in the ad buying industry for years, but
Ad
on the tech
tech.
side of it.
Yeah.
And so he's just so damn smart, you know. We're like, talk to us like we're stupid, you know, Brian, like really, really stupid, Brian. You know, like you really got to lower the bar here, because he just goes super fast, but he's very compelling in why DIA is the future, right? And so I'd just be really curious to see like that conversation, because you've been doing this, like you're an OG, you have experience, you tried it, and so I resonate with everything that you said. So I would just love to witness that conversation, because Brian is a really solid and really smart guy, and so are you. And I just feel like at the end of that, like something positive would come of it. And I
The
think
world will be better for it.
I do. And I think it would be a really interesting conversation for us to witness, and anyone else who could witness it, because you're doing it. You're exactly the kind of people like podcasters want to be. You're the kind of podcast that advertisers want to be on. Adam Levin, Podcast Outfitters, just saying. You know? So I just feel like there's real value there, you know, because everybody wants to be like you, Jeff, right? Like that's the goal. How do I get 1 million downloads? How do I, you know? So I'd be really curious to see that conversation. So if you'd ever like to come back, you know, I that would be
Certainly.
an awesome like
Sure.
roundtable conversation to be a part of. Is like, you know,
I mean, I'm happy to debate things
Yeah, and I
related
think-
to podcasting. It's fun.
I think
Yeah.
Brian would actually love to hear how you're using dynamic ad because
I'm pretty sure
I've
I'm
heard
doing
him
something
say,
that nobody else is doing because every time I talk to
Yeah.
someone about it, they're confused and I have to explain it to
Yeah.
them. And then when I do, they understand it, but they're mad about it because they have their way that they want me to like, fall in line with. And that's
Right.
why I don't have a day job, because I would get fired so fast because I don't know. I argue.
I can't have a boss.
I've been almost fired so many times, never actually fired, but it's
Yeah.
coming. One of these days, it's going to happen.
I always quit first. I'm like, take
Right.
this job
That's-
and
Yes,
That's
that's
me.
been my
Bob.
life story.
I never wanted to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. Seriously, it was really great, and we appreciate you coming on and taking time to hang out with us. And speaking of Apple and iTunes, you can subscribe there. We don't really care. What we really want.
But do it.
What we really but do it. But what we really want is we want some comments on YouTube. Like, I was thinking about it. I was driving the other day. Like, some people are watching these. Like, leave us a comment. In
Yeah.
YouTube. I don't care. I don't care if you rate us. You can do that too. But we don't really care. What we want to know. Am I funny? Am I as funny as I think I am? Is Adam as interesting as we think he is? Tell us what's up, man. You know what I mean? Do you like our guests? Just anything, Molly, sober up, whatever you got.
How can we
I
help?
Take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can we help? What do you want us to talk about? Who should we interview? Just blink once if you're okay. You know what I'm saying? Let us
Yeah.
know.
And
that
Jeff,
you're
what's
out
your
there.
website for people to check you out?
JeffSanders.com.
Easy.
Easy
Winning.
peasy.
Genius.
Yeah.
Did
There
you
are
buy that
1,000
domain when you
people
started
named
your
Jeff
podcast?
Sanders. There's so many Jeff Sanders in the world. The fact that I have the .com is truly remarkable. So
Seriously.
Major win.
Did you buy the domain when you started your podcast? in,
$600 later, yes, I bought.
1972. Yeah.
Oh, man.
premium domain. And I got it
$600?
It was $600 when I bought it, and I guarantee if I bought it today, just like, other names that are popular, it'd be in multiple thousands. Like these kinds of, shorter names .coms are very pricey. So I got lucky. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Don't let
You're
that
an
thing
outlier,
expire.
Yeah, because I'll buy that thing.
I've got registered for 9 more years from now, and I'll keep bumping that up. So
So you're good to go.
I think I'm solid. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
You got it. Awesome.
Thanks,
well, Jeff,
Jeff.
thanks again. And we'll catch everybody again next week on the podcast club. See you next time.
See ya.